Welcome back to the channel. If you've been watching the Dinar story closely, then this is one of those weekends that people are talking about non-stop. Everywhere you look, you're hearing the same words again and again. It is done. It is close. It is this weekend. It is about to happen. Some people hear that and get excited fast. Others hear it and remember how many times the story has been pushed forward before. That's why this moment matters. The real question is not just what people are saying, but why they are saying it now. Why is the pressure building at this exact time? Why are so many viewers, investors, and Intel followers paying attention right now instead of waiting quietly for another Monday? That's what we're going to break down today, in plain English, with no hype and no confusion. We are not here to chase noise. We are here to look at the pattern, the timing, the signals, and the reasons people believe this weekend could be different from the rest. A lot of the chatter right now is built around the idea that major exchange events are usually not handled in a loud, open way. They are handled in a controlled way. They are handled when banks can manage traffic, when staff can be ready, and when the process can be organized without the full pressure of a normal business week. That's why so many people keep coming back to the weekend idea. A weekend gives time, it gives room, it gives the system a chance to close, adjust, and reopen under new conditions if something major is changing. That's why investors keep listening when they hear talk about Saturday or Sunday. It's not because every weekend will be the weekend. It's because the weekend fits the kind of quiet, controlled movement people have been waiting for. Whether you like the Intel side or not, that's the logic being repeated over and over. The story is not just about a rate, it's also about timing, structure, and who can handle the process without creating panic. Now let's talk about why people are not just focused on the dinar alone. They're also looking at the banking system, the digital system, the payment system, and the larger direction Iraq seems to be moving in. A lot of viewers are saying the country is becoming more cashless, more organized, and more connected to a modern banking setup. That's part of why this story keeps staying alive. When people hear about cards, digital payments, payroll systems, banking reform, and modern settlement tools, they start asking whether the financial foundation is being prepared for something bigger. That doesn't automatically mean a rate change is happening this second. It does mean the environment is being watched carefully. Investors want to know whether the plumbing is ready before the water turns on. They want to know whether the banks, the systems, and the controls are in place before any public movement is announced. That's why every small update becomes important. It's not just about a headline, it's about the shape of the system behind the headline. A big part of today's discussion is the idea that official statements don't always tell the full story. Sometimes people expect a government or a central bank to announce everything in a direct, obvious way. But in many financial situations, the real work happens quietly before the public ever hears a big statement. That's why so many investors read between the lines. They look for agreements, banking reforms, and policy language. They look for signs of preparation instead of waiting for someone to say it's done. And that's exactly why the current conversation is getting so much attention. People are asking whether the silence itself is a sign. They are asking whether the careful wording, the lack of bold public claims, and the repeated mention of banking modernization all point to a controlled transition. In this community, those little details matter a lot. They may not prove everything, but they shape how people think about the timing. That's why so many eyes are on the weekend, and why so many viewers are treating this moment as one to watch closely. Another reason investors are focused right now is the idea that Iraq is still moving through major financial and political steps at the same time. That's not unusual in a transition period. When a country is trying to modernize, stabilize, and shift how money moves through the economy, the changes can happen in layers. One layer may be banking, another may be payments, another may be oil policy, another may be government coordination. People in the dinar world often try to to connect all those pieces into one larger picture. Sometimes they are right to look at the whole picture. Sometimes they go too far. The truth is usually somewhere in the middle. But even with caution, it's fair to say that investors are watching these layers because they believe the layers are linked. If the banking side is improving, if the payment side is improving, and if the country is trying to look more stable and more modern, then people naturally wonder whether those changes are preparing the ground for something major. That's why this weekend feels heavier than ordinary weekends. Now let's talk about the rumor machine, because that's part of the story too. In every dinar cycle, there are always voices saying it's done, it's now, it's this weekend, it's finally here. Some of those voices are confident, some are careless, and some are simply repeating what they have heard. The problem is that excitement can spread faster than facts. That's why smart investors try to stay alert without losing their balance. You can listen to the noise, but you should not let the noise run your decisions. This is especially important when people start talking about private exchanges, special lists, hidden access, or separate channels for certain groups. Those claims always attract attention because they make people feel like they are getting insider treatment. But people need to be careful in any major financial event. The most important thing is not who sounds the most certain, it's who can prove what is happening. That's why this weekend conversation should be treated with interest, but also with caution. Watch closely, yes. Jump blindly, no. A lot of viewers are also hearing claims about a more private exchange route, and that's another reason the community is buzzing. People like the idea of privacy, control, and a smoother process. That's understandable. Nobody wants confusion when real money is involved. Nobody wants to feel rushed, exposed, or pushed into a decision they don't understand. So when people talk about a safer exchange, they are really talking about reducing risk and avoiding chaos. That concern is real. At the same time, any investor needs to slow down and think clearly before following promises that sound too polished. A truly safe process should never depend on pressure or fear. It should depend on knowledge, documentation, and a clear understanding of the steps involved. That's why the safest mindset is to prepare before any public event, not after the fact. Whether the weekend brings movement or not, the lesson stays the same. Be informed, stay calm, and don't let excitement replace judgment. Another important angle is the idea that Iraq is becoming more connected to modern financial tools that people already use every day in other countries. Think about debit cards, credit cards, digital wallets, payroll systems, and electronic transfers. In the modern world, money doesn't move only by paper notes. It moves through systems. It moves through institutions. It moves through controls. That's why people keep saying the banking system matters so much. If a country wants to handle a large financial transition, the back end has to work. The accounts have to work. The transfers have to work. The record keeping has to work. The controls have to work. That's what makes the process feel believable to investors who follow structure rather than rumor. They are not just watching the rate talk, they are watching the system that would have to support any major change. That's one reason the weekend narrative keeps coming back. People believe the system behind the scenes has been moving toward a controlled release, not a random surprise. The oil conversation is also pulling attention right now because many investors believe oil and currency are connected through broader economic strength. When oil prices move, people start asking whether that affects Iraq's financial position and timing. Some look at global oil trends and see pressure building. Others look at local pricing and see a different picture. That comparison fuels even more debate. If one part of the market is moving hard while another part seems discounted or delayed, people start wondering whether the country is holding back certain adjustments until the right date. That's why the oil discussion keeps getting pulled into the dinar conversation. It gives people something visible to watch. It feels concrete. It feels like a clue. But the important thing is to be careful not to overstate what any one price means. Oil prices alone don't prove a currency event. They do, however, become part of the story investors watch when they are trying to understand the larger timing picture. That is why the weekend is being treated like a window, not just another random point on the calendar. The same thing happens when people talk about gold. When gold moves, people read emotion into it. They read fear, confidence, or uncertainty into the market. If gold is weaker, some viewers say people are less afraid. If gold is stronger, others say the world is nervous. This is why market watchers love using gold as a signal. It becomes a mood meter. In the current conversation, that mood meter is being used to support the idea that people feel the system is changing and that the pressure may be easing. Whether that is fully true or not, the discussion itself is important. It shows how investors are connecting events. They're not just looking at one chart or one article. They're combining banking, oil, gold, politics, and public behavior into one larger narrative. That narrative says the environment is shifting. That is why the weekend talk keeps getting louder. People don't just want a date, they want a sign that the whole machine is moving in the right direction. Another thing many investors are watching is the language used in official announcements and agreements. People often point out when documents are called agreements, memorandums, or understandings instead of full contracts. To many viewers, that wording matters. They believe it means something is being prepared but not fully locked in yet. They think it shows movement without finality. And in these circles, that distinction matters a lot. People want to know whether a country is still setting the stage or whether it's already at the release point. That is why every word is analyzed. A single phrase can become a major talking point. A single line can trigger a whole weekend of speculation. Whether you agree with that style of reading or not, it's part of the way this community works. It's also why investors need to keep both ears open and one foot on the ground. Listen to the wording, but don't let wording alone make your decisions for you. There's also a strong belief in this community that major financial events are planned with coordinated political timing. That means the public may only see the surface, while deeper timing is being managed behind the scenes. Some viewers trust that idea completely. Others are more skeptical. Still, the reason it keeps coming up is simple. People have seen enough delayed announcements, careful language, and slow rollouts to believe that timing is rarely accidental. If that's true, then a weekend becomes even more interesting. Why? Because it creates privacy, control, and a cleaner sequence of action. If a country or financial system wants to change conditions without creating a public mess, a weekend can be the best place to do it. That doesn't prove this weekend will be the one. It does explain why so many people keep leaning toward the weekend theory. It fits the pattern they believe they're seeing, and right now, pattern recognition is driving almost every conversation in this space. Now, let's deal with the biggest emotional part of the story, expectation. A lot of people are tired. A lot of people have waited for a long time. A lot of people have heard soon so many times that the word itself has lost meaning. That is why every new burst of excitement brings both hope and caution. People want to believe. They also don't want to be disappointed again. That tension is real. It's why some viewers are saying it's done, while others are saying let's wait and see. Both reactions come from the same place, years of watching, hoping, and trying to understand a very complicated story. That's also why balanced voices matter. The balanced voices say keep your expectations under control, keep your eyes open, and don't confuse progress with completion. Progress is real, completion is different. This weekend may bring more progress, it may even bring something bigger, but until something is clear, the wisest move is to stay steady and pay attention. One of the strongest themes in today's conversation is preparation. Regardless of whether the event happens this weekend or later, the people who do best are usually the ones who prepared early. They already thought about where to go, what questions to ask, how to stay organized, and how to avoid making rushed mistakes. That principle is bigger than any single currency story. It applies to all major money events. If you're waiting on something important, then preparation gives you an advantage over over-panic. That's why so many people in this space talk about private planning, safety, and structure. They don't want viewers to get caught off guard. They want them to know that the moment things become public, the crowd will rush in fast. And when the crowd rushes in, confusion rises. That is why the smartest people try to be ready before the noise starts. Whether this weekend changes the game or not, readiness is still the best habit you can build right now. At the same time, investors should not forget that not every story repeated online is trustworthy just because it's repeated often. A rumor can sound powerful when it's repeated by several people, but repetition is not proof. That is one of the biggest lessons in this whole space. People need to ask where the claim came from, who is repeating it, and whether anything concrete supports it. A real signal usually has some structure behind it. A real change usually leaves a trail. A real move usually has visible consequences. That is why the best watchers focus on details, not just emotion. They notice when the story is becoming more specific. They notice when the language changes. They notice when systems are being built. They notice when multiple signs begin to point the same direction. That doesn't mean they believe every claim. It means they're trained to separate hope from evidence. And in a market like this, that skill matters a lot. Still, the reason this weekend is getting attention is because the pattern feels different to many viewers. The talk is louder, the confidence is stronger, the timing feels tighter, the banking discussion feels more advanced, the public narrative feels more coordinated. That combination is exactly why so many people are watching closely. They're not just watching for a headline, they're watching for a shift in tone. They're watching to see whether the story moves from possibility to action. That's a major difference. Possibility can last for years. Action is different. Once action starts, people notice quickly. That is why the phrase, "watch this weekend closely," has become so powerful. It captures the tension between waiting and expecting. It captures the idea that something may be forming even if not everyone sees it yet. And for investors who have followed this story for a long time, that feeling is enough to keep them alert without fully letting go of caution. So here's the bottom line for today. There's a lot of talk, a lot of confidence, and a lot of attention on the weekend. Some people believe the event is already done. Some believe it's very close. Some believe more steps still have to be completed. The truth is that nobody on the outside should pretend to know more than the facts allow. But it's fair to say that this is one of the most closely watched moments in a long time. The banking system, the policy language, the oil discussion, the gold reaction, the public excitement, and the repeated weekend focus all combine into one very loud picture. That picture may not give us a final answer today, but it does show where investor attention is going. And right now, that attention is locked on this weekend. Stay patient, stay sharp, and keep watching the details, because whether this is the moment or just another step, the people who pay attention now will be the ones best prepared for what comes next.